Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Tuesday morning to you all. Hope you guys are doing awesome out there this morning and having a wonderful start to your day. And I do hope everyone's having a great week out there so far. I got good news for folks who are sick of the heat like I am. I know it's the dead of summer. It's supposed to be hot, but does it have to be this hot? So I got good news for folks who are sick of it like I am. There's a cool down on the way for a good portion of the country. And yes, that does include portions of the South. So we're going to speak on this right off the dot here in this video. Then we'll give you an update on the tropics. We'll compare model guides. Is there anything we need to watch? Any areas of the Atlantic we need to pay attention to? We'll speak on all that, get very detailed. Then we'll talk about today's weather. If you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. And if anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, please put it in the comments below. Let's get rocking and rolling this morning. So what you're looking at here is the Euro ensemble as far as temperatures compared to average. So, you know, basically the cooler colors you see on your screen, like the blues and the greens, these are below average temperatures. And then the warmer colors you see on your screen, like the oranges and the reds, these are above average temperatures based off this Euro ensemble run. So we're going to start off for the last day of July here in the next 48 hours, July 31st, about midday Thursday. And there is definitely a bit of a temperature battleground across the country. For example, the blues and the greens you see here, this is anywhere between 3-4 degrees below average and, 10 to 15 degrees below average. And you might be thinking, Mitch, what do you mean below average? Well, you got to kind of know what your average temperatures are for your neck of the woods for this time of the year. If it's around 85 degrees, then maybe this means highs in the mid to low 70s. It just depends on where you live, right? And you got to know that information. And if you don't, there's ways to find out, and maybe I'll throw a link under the video. But anyways, let's not get too far off track. As you can tell, below average temperatures settling into the middle of the country, the Midwest, into the Great Lakes region, the Northeast. And as we continue to move forward here, let's try to get this back in motion. We start to get into Friday, and those below average temperatures begin to sink a little bit further south, start to take over a larger portion of the country. I mean, look at this. This is anywhere from 5 to 15 degrees below average across areas of the southern New England to the mid-Atlantic. And then look at the middle of the country. I mean, cooler temperatures, very comfortable. It's been just hotter than Hades over the last several days for sure. And then we start to get into the weekend. I mean, this is our Saturday. Look at this. Big portion of the middle to the eastern portion of the country, well below average temperature-wise. I mean, in some areas, just only a few degrees, so I wouldn't call that well below. But, I mean, look at the Carolinas. A little bit of a wedge, a little cold air damming setting up. So, a cooler day, probably generated off rain, I would say. And I'm going to go over that here in a second. But just note that this isn't necessarily that pumpkin spice latte cold front, right? Or it's going to make you want to just brew some just fall-like coffee and go up to Starbucks and put on a sweater. That's not what this is. Now, for areas further north, maybe it feels a little bit like that, but for the South, we're just not quite there yet. But it is going to be a huge relief. Now, we start to get into Sunday. I mean, look, this is Saturday evening. This is crazy. I mean, huge portion of the country below average temperature-wise. And then we get into early next week. I mean, they're still hanging around. Then we get about a week from today, still hanging on for dear life with some of those below average temperatures, just not as below average, only a few degrees across the southeast, but still there. And then, the country will have a chance to start to warm up after that again. But it does look like the southeast, the I-95 corridor, sort of remains around average, or slightly below average as far as temperatures. And in fact, we go past 10 days and still hanging on to some average to, like I said, just a degree or two below average temperatures, but the middle of the country begins to warm up. So that's that. What does this mean as far as temperature? So I'm going to go all the way out to about August 3rd or 4th, and these are predicted high temperatures from the National Weather Service, so actual forecasts from the experts, and this is today. You notice we had all that nasty weather, those tornadoes yesterday in, I believe, South Dakota, and we had, I think, reported 85 to 100 mile per hour winds with some of these clusters of storms that rumbled through areas up here. But today, much cooler. High temperatures only in the 70s and 80s, but you get south of this boundary, kind of inside this ridge, which is right into here, 90s and 100s for high temperatures across the south central U.S., the Central Plains, around the Mississippi Valley. But then you get into Wednesday. Did you notice that difference? Those high temperatures, those higher temperatures kind of get knocked down further to the south. And I mean, that is a discrete, I mean, that is a huge difference here. I mean, look, for example, northern Missouri highs maybe just in the upper 70s. Southern Missouri highs in the upper 90s. 20-degree difference there. And then we get into Thursday the 31st. Look, I mean, just nothing but 70s up here. Nice break from the nasty heat. Deep South, still hot, but there is a little bit of a break coming in. You're not going to get much of a break in late July, early August. A break is just temperatures in the 80s, right? Unless you just get a rainy day and it gets trapped in the upper 70s. But, we get in August 1st, and then we get into August 2nd. And finally, some of those 90s get dropped down to the 80s across Memphis, Little Rock, Nashville, maybe just the upper 80s for like the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But then it does show signs of warming right back up as we get into Sunday, and then we get into Monday, and it's right back into the upper 90s to 100. So, I mean, it's a nice break. But as far as low temperatures, I mean, check it out. We get into the Thursday morning, lows in the low 50s to upper 40s across the upper Midwest. And then look at the 60s dropping down. Then we start to get into August the 1st, Friday morning, a nice break from the heat, backbreaker with the heat up here in the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes region. Temperatures 40s, 50s, but still very warm as far as low temperatures for the South. And then we get into Saturday morning, and a pleasant morning across Missouri down to Illinois. I mean, even Kansas, lows in the low 60s, upper 50s. So a nice break from the heat. And then we get into Sunday morning, and still nice. Just you could get some 60s, lows for 60s all the way down to Little Rock, maybe northern Louisiana, northeast Texas, certainly down to Tennessee. But it does begin to the low temperatures begin to warm back up and creep higher the further north you get, as just the troughing influence leaves us after that. So what about the eastern U.S. as far as temperatures? Today's highs, I mean, it's hot. You got heat advisories, extreme heat warnings littered across the board here. 90s all the way up into Maine for highs, all the way up into lower Michigan. And of course, it's just feels like the armpit of hell down here in the southeast, right? So you go into Wednesday, it's still very hot. Mid-Atlantic still mid to upper 90s. I mean, 90s, just kind of normal summer type stuff down here. But the region you're getting cooler temperatures, say in like Birmingham, Columbia, than DC up to New York City, is because you got a lot of shower and storm activity down here. But you can see the break coming in, and then we get into Thursday. Look at this. Highs in the 70s for Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, southern areas of those states, maybe still in the 80s, but I mean, look at the Northeast, highs in the 70s, nice break from the heat. And then we get into Friday. I mean, look at this, getting all the way down to northern North Carolina, highs only in the low 80s, 80s and 70s for Virginia points north, only in the low 80s to upper 70s in Kentucky. You're getting this break all the way down to the mid-Atlantic, highs only in the 70s and low 80s for so DC, Baltimore. Still very hot down to South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. But then we could get a 10 to 15 degree high temperature drop from Friday to Saturday across some southeast state cities. I mean, these are high temperatures for Saturday. Look at the Carolinas, I mean, 70s and 80s. But listen, I'm going to go over this here in a second. I'm going to show you the dew point map. This isn't an 82-degree day with very low humidity. This is probably an 82-degree day, maybe upper 70s even, as far south as like Columbia, which is where I live, but rainy, cloudy conditions. So a lot of humidity still around, but I do think we can get a morning or two with a break from the humidity. But these are high temperatures. I mean, look at the Ohio Valley, the Midwest, I mean, the Northeast, just beautiful weather up here. And then we get into Sunday. Look at this bit of a cold air damming setup. I mean, highs only in the upper 70s for Atlanta, low 80s. I mean, upper 70s, Charlotte to Columbia. Just a nice break. These are high temperatures, not lows. I mean, some of these are lows right now. But then as we start to get into Monday next week, you can see that the temperatures are starting to warm back up. I mean, this ain't going to last forever in late July, early August, guys. But, these are low temperatures. We get into, let's just jump to the morning of the 1st, Friday morning. Look, lows in the 50s to 40s up here in New England, dropping down to the 60s into southern New England. Hasn't reached the south yet, but I mean, look at these low temperatures in lower Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, 60s, 50s, and then we get into Saturday morning, and then we get into Sunday morning. And this is where we have an opportunity to drop into the 60s as far south as, Georgia and the Carolinas. I mean, they're going for a low of 69 Sunday morning in Columbia, mid to upper 60s, maybe in the Greenville, Spartanburg to Charlotte area. Atlanta, upper 60s for lows. I mean, I know that don't sound very low, guys, but considering the fact that we have not dropped below 70 since June in some of these areas, that's nice. I mean, look at these low temperatures for Sunday morning up here in the Northeast. I mean, Saturday morning could be even cooler. And then, we start to get into the morning of next Monday, August the 4th, and still looks nice. I mean, lows in the 60s, all the way down to Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee, certainly. And just some nice, this is, I would say, Sunday and Monday morning could be a cooler morning, not cold, not chilly. You don't need a jacket, but a cooler morning. So we got that to look forward to. I'm excited about this, but just remember that dew points are a huge player into this. So dew points in the 70s, very humid, right? 60s, it's humid, you can feel it, but not that bad. Dew points in the 50s and lower, that's when you have a bit of a crisp air mass. You don't feel really any humidity in the atmosphere. So, and that's what we're looking at here, the dew point map. So dew points in the 70s, very humid, obviously, and this is getting into tomorrow evening. Let's go on a jump all the way into about August 1st, the morning of August 1st. So you see right here, you got dew points in the 50s, 50s up here, even some 40s, and then you kind of get, let's draw on this a little bit, and then you kind of get in this area, you got dew points in the 60s, and then you kind of get along this area right here, dew points are still tropical, very humid air, okay? And then we start to get, say, let's go all the way into Saturday morning. You can see some drier air surging south, right here, sort of the boundary between, humid air, dry air, and humid air. All right, this is the Euro. And then we start to get into, say, Sunday morning. Come on, you got it. I need to talk nicely to you or something. All right, the pivotal weather, I love it. It's awesome, but it can be very finicky sometimes. And let's go into, man, you are struggling. Come on, pivotal weather. All right. Then we get into Sunday morning. You see some of this drier air sneaking down into the Carolinas, Northeast Georgia, dew points into the 60s. We will take that this time of the year. In early August, absolutely. But I mean, nice dry air, dew points in the 50s all the way down to the Northeast and the Midwest. And, as we start to get into, say, this just is not wanting to work. Come on, man. And as we start to get, here we go. Now we're working. Now, as we start to get into Monday morning, just a nice little surge of dry air right before the pattern flips back to being warmer. Not extremely hot, but warmer. You already got a surge of moist air going all the way back up to Canada on the backside of this trough. But you kind of get one last little push of dry air as we're getting in the next Monday morning that could allow our temperatures to drop down to the upper 60s in certain areas. But, as we start to move forward into later next week, our temperatures, our dew points certainly start to rebound to more moist levels as we get into midway next week. So the pivotal weather's just having some troubles this morning. It's been working good with me lately, but not this morning. But anyways, an update on the tropics. So there is some pieces I can circle out here, pieces of the puzzle, if you will, out here in the Atlantic. And the main area is this. This is just a lot of tropical moisture. Okay, you can call this one giant tropical wave. You can call it this a tropical wave, this a tropical wave. But in general, it's just convectively active right now. But a lot of dry air continues to be on top of this. And this convection that's being indicated, shower and storm activity is what I mean by convection, that's being indicated by these colder cloud tops, which is showing up, in the oranges and the reds and the blacks and the whites into here. This indicates taller updrafts. Taller up it gets, the colder up it gets. This is shown by the colors here. It is not expected to maintain themselves. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if over the next 48 hours this looks totally different. But if it doesn't, then we need to keep more of an eye on it. But this is the area we're watching. It's what we call the MDR, main development region. We got to watch this area. Can anything sustain itself and just work into this area or into this area? It's a big question. Okay, so let's go over some model guides. Latest from the National Hurricane Center says there's no chance of development. So we might as well just cruise right on past that. Now you look at the latest Euro, shows that tropical wave. This is getting into tomorrow evening. We get into August 1st. Not a whole lot to show you, but that's it right there. Now you're going to see some more energy come behind this. All right, so we start to get into August 2nd. That tropical wave is still there. It's barely visible on your screen. This doesn't look any different than this really up here or this over here. some more tropical moisture coming off Africa. That wave is still there. It's just barely hanging around. It's sneaking into the southwest Atlantic, which is a little bit more favorable as far as the upper wind pattern and sea surface temperatures. Then we get about a week from today, and there is definitely a more well put together wave behind this between day 7 and day 10. But that kind of takes the same route as the one in front of it, and then there's another wave behind that. So it just almost looks like, and this is way out there, past day 10. This is like August 12th, for example. It looks like the wave train starts on the long range Euro, but it's the long range. And even though the Euro is a more respected model, it's still long range. So one thing the Euro does that's interesting that changed from the last several runs is it takes the remnants of this wave right here, slows it down. It's still there. You can barely tell. It's just popping off convection, and then slides it over Florida, gets over the Eastern Gulf, and watch what happens here. Develops into a hurricane and is deepening as it approaches like New Orleans, like Louisiana. So it literally takes the entire 15-day run for it to make it from where it's at right now all the way into the Northern Gulf. So that's new. It also has another wave behind it. So we'll have to watch this. The GFS, what does it show? You only got about 10 days of the GFS, which is all we need. Shows those waves dancing around. There it is. It's right there. Does anything get going behind it? No, not really. There is a wave right there. You can see it. It's just, you can't see it well. What about closer to home? Does it do anything with that wave? Let's back it up a little bit. It's right there. Does it do anything with that wave? It does sneak it into the Gulf, but it doesn't really develop it. So, we'll watch. And, I will continue to show you that your AI model until it completely backs off, but it continues to light the wave that's in the central Atlantic right now. This right here, and that's what it is. And it does try to strengthen this into a weak low pressure, hits Florida, but the interesting thing to me is it has another wave behind it too. It's not strong or anything. But the interesting thing to me is all three of these model runs show whatever's left of this, whether it's strong or not, getting into the Gulf. So, but one thing I will tell you is between now and the next week, Euro Ensemble, guys, does not like that wave. Its operational run does, but between now and the next week, it does not like it. Now, it likes more action firing off the eastern seaboard, which I think has a shot to develop with all that energy hanging around. But, if we expand this past the day 7 mark to day 10, you can see a few members trying to strengthen as they start to get into the Eastern Gulf. But I will say that, it's only a few members out of like 51. So just you can't really pay much attention to that. So we'll continue to watch all this stuff, guys. It's nothing to be concerned about. That's why, the last couple videos, the tropics have not been the first thing I've spoken on, just because I don't want to talk it to death, that there's nothing crazy out there, and I don't want to blow something out of proportion that really doesn't need to be blown out of proportion. So we got some moisture that's glitching out down here in New Mexico. We got moisture that is riding the top of the ridge. We're going to get a lot of storm activity in this area today. This is the leftovers of that powerful cluster of storms that produced all that weather yesterday afternoon and evening and last night across areas of the upper Midwest. It has since weakened, a little bit of moisture dancing around the Carolinas. Now, pivotal weather is, it's weird. We just had those issues with pivotal weather. Their thing was down too as far as their watches and warnings, which I like to look at more. So I have to go old school and look at the actual National Weather Service graphic here. In the orange areas, that's, once again, make it a little bit bigger. That is heat advisories. These purple regions, these are extreme heat warnings. So just another blistering hot day. I mean, that's the big news for today. Now, the other news is the risk of severe weather. Light green, general risk of thunderstorms. Dark green, marginal risk, level 1 out of 5. And the yellow is a level 2 out of 5 risk of severe weather. That stretches from Montana through Wyoming, areas of South Dakota, into Nebraska, portions of Kansas, and all the way into Iowa. What's driving this? The tornado threat, sub 2%, so it doesn't even show up on your map. Wind threat, though, okay, hopefully you can see this well. 15% risk in the yellow area of winds exceeding 55 to 60 miles per hour within 25 miles in a given location. But once again, for this black outlined area, there's a 10% risk of these winds exceeding like 75, 80, 85, 90 miles per hour. So we have a risk of significant wind gusts in this area here. North Platte, Broken Bow over to Omaha, just about on Lincoln, Norfolk. Big time wind risk for today. I could see an enhanced risk upgrade for some of these areas. And I will move it over here. There is a risk of damaging winds back to Rapid City, Casper, in these areas. And then the hail threats is really positioned back in Montana, Wyoming, and areas of South Dakota. There's a 15% risk of hail exceeding 1 inch in diameter or larger in these areas. Excessive rainfall, if you live in these yellow areas, 15% risk of rainfall exceeding flash flood guidance. Same thing down here in New Mexico and areas of Texas. A little bit of a flash flooding threat. I'm losing my voice here in the southeast of the apps, so be aware of that. A little bit of moisture in place. And speaking of the southeast, we'll get this in motion. We get into this afternoon. I'm not going to zoom in any of these areas, but Georgia, northern Florida, the Carolinas could get more widespread thunderstorms today. For example, we'll stop it here. It's around 7 p.m. A lot of thunderstorms dancing around. This is kind of day one of a pretty active pattern. Some areas had thunderstorms yesterday, but today it'll be more widespread across Georgia, the Carolinas, even eastern Tennessee, even in Alabama, and certainly Florida. And they'll just kind of dance around. They could cluster up from Atlanta to the Greenville-Spartanburg area up to Hendersonville and Asheville. Later tonight, it shows just a congealed area of heavy storm activity, so you got to be aware of flash flooding with that. And then we're going to wake up tomorrow morning to probably some storms dancing around in southeast Louisiana and southern Mississippi. Northeast, not a whole lot to speak on. The weather seems pretty quiet today, pretty similar. Nothing really to speak on. South central U.S., not a whole lot to speak on either, outside of some shower and storm activity and some heavy downpours across New Mexico, and a lot of activity up here in Colorado, especially the northeastern portion of the state. But just pop-up activity elsewhere across the southern plains, Missouri, Arkansas, quite literally the definition of a pop-up thunderstorm day. But a closer look at Colorado here as we're starting to get to 3, 4, 5 storms will fire off the Front Range, and it'll just be a very stormy afternoon and evening across northeast Colorado. And there will be some storms in southeast Colorado too, but definitely in northeastern areas of the state. So we take it to 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m. A lot of storm action up there for sure. The north central U.S., the big storyline is later this evening. Large area of convection will pop off in Nebraska. Areas of South Dakota also, even maybe like northwestern Kansas, and we'll have a nasty line of storms that kind of clusters up and moves across Nebraska overnight into Iowa. Another one can get going here in areas of western South Dakota and Nebraska, but these storms will blast through overnight across eastern Nebraska into Iowa, and then we wake up tomorrow morning to the leftovers of it. But of course, a closer look at all of this. This is South Dakota first, and we start to get into this afternoon. You can see those storms near Pierre, and then we start to get into 8 p.m. Listen, I know there's a sub 2% risk of a tornado, but we cannot rule out South Dakota. South Dakota has been producing some pretty wild photogenic tornadoes, and yet one yesterday did a lot of damage from what I saw in some of the videos. But you see this discrete cell kind of between Pierre, Brookings, Sioux Falls, Yankton. Just be aware of that one. Clusters up, and we get to 10 p.m. Brookings, Sioux Falls, Yankton. Be careful with those storms as they move through, and then more storms near Rapid City, pretty much any communities. And this is when a flash flooding threat can get going here. 1 a.m. a lot of thunderstorm activity in southwest and southern areas of South Dakota, and then we get into the overnight hours and things should begin to calm down, but a lot of rain could fall in these areas. Nebraska, it'll take a while, but as we start to get to the evening, thunderstorms will begin to fire. Late afternoon, early evening, you see those storms just right out here in kind of west central Nebraska. And then we start to get into 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m. Thunderstorms look pretty disruptive across North Platte, McCook, up to Broken Bow. And there could be some storms already ongoing in areas of central and north central Nebraska. And then we start to get to 11 p.m., midnight, 1 a.m. These could cluster up into a kind of a bowed out line of storms, but this more so just looks like just clusters of storms. All these could produce damaging winds. This is 1 o'clock in the morning too, so it's pretty late at night, so just be aware of some big boomers overnight if you're sleeping. And then this action around 4 a.m. could be much earlier than that. Omaha begins to hit you guys, and then it calms down. But just be aware of these, significant wind gusts, and we'll switch it and look at that really quick. And here we go. I mean, look at that. Strong wind gusts. Those yellow areas, I mean, that's 55, 60 mile per hour wind gust. And this will blast through these areas. So very strong winds with this also. And then we look at Iowa. Start off around 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m. The theme in Iowa lately has been storms moving in late at night. And here they are, 11 p.m. Tonight's no different. Here comes the storms moving into northwestern Iowa. Then they drop down to Fort Dodge, Mason City, Denison after midnight. And, these will pack a punch. Damaging winds, some large hails possible, but damaging winds by far the biggest threat into these areas. And it'll just take until after midnight. So if nothing happens between now and the sun setting tonight, you're like, I guess we ain't going to get storms. Just wait till tonight. They'll move in. This is 4 o'clock in the morning. Creston to Des Moines, Ames, Marshalltown, Waterloo, big storms moving in, Cedar Rapids, and these eventually can move into Dubuque, Davenport, down to Burlington tomorrow morning. A lot of heavy rain associated with it, a lot of strong wind gusts. And I will show you kind of Illinois and Indiana, but to be honest, it doesn't look like a lot of action moves in until tomorrow morning. This is 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, but there's a risk of severe weather between now and the next 24 hours, so I did want to show you guys that. Western U.S., Wyoming, Montana, I would say is the big areas to watch out for. So this is what Montana could look like over the next 24 hours. See the storms near Bozeman, Billings, Miles City, and they don't get really too far north. It looks like there's more stable, cooler air up there. But this is 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and we drop it down to Wyoming, and this is what it looks like here. 5 p.m. Hail will be the bigger threat here. I mean, anywhere Woodland, Sheridan, Gillette, Casper, any of these cells can produce a lot of hail. This is 8 p.m. This is 9 p.m. This is 10, 11. And we get to midnight. Things should begin to calm down after that. Temperatures today, warm all the way up the I-95 corridor. It's just warm everywhere, pretty much. It's another hot day, very humid. And this is out west. It's pretty much hot across the country today. But really starting today into tomorrow, the cooler air will begin to surge in, just like we just talked about in the beginning of the video. All right, that's all I got. I was running out of steam with that one. God bless everyone. Stay cool. And we'll talk soon. God bless.